Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. My name is Carey Nieuwhof, and my goal is to help you lead like never before. So what I do every week is I sit down with world-class leaders and church leaders, business leaders, and I talk to them about what made them who they are and try to have the conversation with them that you would have if you got to sit down for lunch with them or have dinner with them or really got to spend some time with them. So we go into the backstory and we explore what made them who they are and some of the principles they've learned along the way. So if you enjoy this episode, I would love for you to like it, to subscribe, and also to share it with your friends. And in the meantime, here's today's episode. Chris, thank you so much for being so honest in your brand new book. It's called Out of the Cave. And it's surprising to a lot of leaders. And I mean, I kind of knew a little bit of this story, getting to know you over the last few years, but not at the level you share it in your new book. You lead one of the largest and fastest growing churches in America. I think from what I read doing my research, about 60,000 people either attend or call your church home, which is a lot of people. But, you know, you're sharing your struggle with anxiety and depression. And I think a lot of leaders would be surprised. So I'm really grateful. But can you give us some of the backstory on that, Chris, to get us started?
Well, thank you, first of all, for letting me be on your podcast. I admire you and consider you a great friend, and I appreciate it very much. A lot of people know actually my story of what got me actually as a church planter 20 years ago, that in 1999 had a real bout with depression. And I'm kind of that glass is not even half full kind of a guy. It's always all the way full. So yeah. I'm always, happy and wake up happy pretty much every day. In fact, was a bit critical of those who said they were depressed or had bad attitudes. I'm like, get over it. And man, and then when I went through it, it's not quite that easy, and
yeah.
Probably the real reason is you don't even know how you got there, and you certainly don't know the way out. It's very disorienting, which is why I actually use the cave metaphor to describe depression. But of course, in 1999, that led to actually me discovering what I was going to do with the rest of my life. So that bad thing turned into be something that led me to the best thing that would ever happen to me when I had the idea to plant a church in Birmingham, coming out of a 21-day of prayer and fasting effort that our church was doing. And I really felt like God had spoken to me. And so anyway, that was a great thing. So I've openly talked about that all throughout the years, just telling the story of our church. And honestly, I never dealt with it again until 2018 when, as you know, some pastors in America, it seemed like there were two or three right back to back who had taken their lives, young pastors. And Carey, I didn't know any of them. I mean, they weren't friends, but man, it impacted me like they were some of my best friends. I just remember just grieving as if I knew these people personally. And we were in a series where I do Q&A. I do one of these every fall based on questions that people give us at Easter. So we'll ask them, what topics do you want us to talk about? And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a message on depression and anxiety, because a lot of the questions our church had given was around stress, depression, and anxiety. I knew nothing about it. I'm very embarrassed to say I was a pastor for 35 years at the time and had never studied it or preached or brought a message around this topic that is obviously such a huge deal to so many people. So I did a week's worth of study, which is not enough, but I brought a message that Sunday that became the most rewatched message times 100. I mean, we hit a nerve. And then I was speaking at a pastors conference, and Taylor made it around pastors, same response. And I thought, wait a minute, this is a big deal here. And it seemed as though the more vulnerable I would get, the more I would share my own story, my own struggle, the more people responded and honestly found help. And so I decided to go on a 2-year writing project. It's the most work I ever did on a book, and did both secular and spiritual research and study, and bring a lot of non-spiritual solutions to the table in the book, but also got very vulnerable about my own journey. And then this is kind of funny about it. The manuscript was due. See if anybody recognizes this date, March 2020.
Yeah,
exactly. And then this pandemic hits, and I actually asked the publisher, can I have a few more months to to write, knowing what people are already going through, and then I ended up having another bout of depression right in the middle of this writing project in June of 2020. And so anyway, so chapter 3 ended up having a story from June of 2020. So anyway, it's just something that
yeah. So you had this like 20-year lapse between bouts of anxiety and depression. And then literally 3 months after you turn in the manuscript, boom, it hits again. Can you walk us through June 2020? Can you let us know what happened?
Well, we'll all remember it was on the heels of the tragic death of George Floyd, and cities were burning, and people were confused, and of course we're in the middle of a political battle where just all these tensions that were happening, and we ended up having our own version of kind of a cancel culture experience here at our church. It made national news. Next thing I know, I'm in the New York Times and Washington Post, and being tweeted about. I didn't even know what was going on. I was actually trying to be on vacation. I was out, had tried to get away with my family, and my phone's blowing up. I find myself with 6 hours a day on phone calls, and media's calling and wanting to know what our church's stance was on different topics. And Carey, it just got the best of me. I mean, I wasn't ever going to take my physical life, but I was on the doorstep of ministry suicide. I was done. I was done. I just, didn't feel like I signed up for all of that. And just one of my greatest pet peeves is to be misunderstood. And I felt like I was being misunderstood. And I took responsibility for what that I thought I was responsible for. And, it didn't seem like it was enough. And I don't know, and it hurt. And when you're a leader, it feels like people dehumanize you sometimes. And it's just, and man, I just felt like I was just this little boy over in a corner, wishing people knew who I really was. And I don't know, it kind of got the best of me. And thank God I stayed in contact with the people that love me, and my friends and pastor and different people in my life, and was very, very honest with them. And that's what I did right, by the way, is I never was alone in those thoughts. I always shared it with someone.
Yeah, you are describing, I think, a moment that most leaders have had, either a smaller version of that or some perhaps a bigger version than that. But that kind of panic, that confusion, what did it feel like for you in June 2020? Can you walk us through a typical day, Chris?
Well, like I said, we were on vacation, so I was trying to be a good dad and husband. I had my kids there. We had rented this cabin in the mountains, and we're trying to have some family time. And again, the phone is just blowing up, and I don't know. It just.
Did you get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, I got out of bed. I just was so sad. Honestly, I just was just so sad. You work. Of course, only I know how hard I feel like I've worked over the years, and how much my heart and soul is really into the ministry that God has so graciously allowed us to build. But it felt like it was all unraveling right in my hands, that in just moments, 20, solid years of hard work was just coming apart. And of course it wasn't. Thank God. There were people saying, look, just be steady, stay steady. This will be a fainting memory in a few weeks or months. And they were right, by the way. It kind of left as fast as it came. But boy, when you're in the middle of it, again, that's why I use the cave as the metaphor for depression, because it's dark, it's disorienting. There's a way out, but you don't know where it is.
Yeah.
And then your brain makes up stuff. I don't know if you've ever actually been in a cave. A moth can come by your head and you think it's a bat, right? So you start, you're making up stuff now that's not even true, which adds to the depression and the anxiety. And I did have, actually, this is the first time I've actually admitted this. I didn't even include this in the book, but I had 2 full-on panic attacks where I had to have doctors come and take care of me, and my heart rate's at 200 beats a minute, and it was horrible. It was bad. It was horrible.
It must be so disorienting for a positive person too, right? To find yourself in that situation.
Yeah, because you think it. Yeah, because I've always been able to talk my way out of things and just because I think I really have a good attitude. I'm from South Louisiana, and we always say if you can't have fun with a person that's from South Louisiana, it's your fault. These Cajuns are kind of crazy, and we love to eat and we love to laugh, and that's been my life. And then next thing I know, it's a broadside to your emotions and to your soul.
You and I were talking before we hit record, and talking about 2018 when I think that's when Andrew Steckline died by suicide, and then the year after it was Jared Wilson, and there were many others too. But those are two that made national headlines. And I wrote a piece around that, and I talked about my dark season in 2006 where I was suicidal. And we were talking a little bit about, like, was it 1999 you had your first bout of depression that led to the founding of Church of the Highlands? And I believe we talked about this on a previous episode when you were on a few years ago. So we'll link to that in the show notes, Chris, if people want to listen back. But did it start to almost feel like, when I look back on 2006, I have to remind myself, yes, that was actually you. Carey, you were in that place, because it doesn't feel that way anymore. And I guess that's the hardest thing. There's an old John Mayer song that talks about when autumn comes, it never asks, it just picks up where it left you last, something like that. I've got it slightly wrong, but that's what I found that the blues do. And I haven't burned out since, but I just remember how dark that season was and how how I felt at the time when I go back to it, that, like you said, it's over. Like there's no light in the cave. And I was coming quickly to the conclusion that my ministry, my leadership was over at the age of 40. Did you feel that in June of 2020? And if so, I'd love you to talk about that. And then how did you move through that to where you are again now?
Well, actually, it was the piece you wrote that actually was the final prod for me to kind of be more vulnerable about my own journeys and to write this book. So thank you for that. I remember vividly reading what you wrote, and that you were so incredibly honest. It had enough hope in there as well, but you felt like I was getting the real Carey, and I knew that's what I needed to do. This particular time, Carey, what's different about the first time this happened to me and the second is, honestly, it's just maturity. I'm old enough to know this too shall pass, and I was old enough to know what to do. The first time I didn't do anything really right. The second time in June of 2020, I knew what to do. I knew never to get alone in my thoughts. I knew I needed to not do what psychologists call ruminating, where you take your distress, you chew it, you process it. That's a word everybody loves in this generation. I just need some time to process. And then we swallow it, but then we bring it back up. Well, it doesn't get better. It gets grosser, right? It always comes up in worse condition. That's what a ruminating animal does. A cow chews its cud, swallows the grass, brings it back up and chews it some more. We do that with our thoughts, and that's a very, very, very dangerous thing to do. And so that was what was different this second time is I knew I didn't need to get alone in my thoughts. I knew I needed a process with someone else, that I would be my own worst counselor when I'm hurting. And we shouldn't trust our own selves and our thoughts, our emotions, and we certainly shouldn't make decisions, and especially ones that are life-altering. So we allow others into that process and allow our souls to kind of get back in order. I heard one person say that emotional trauma and depression is like the waves of a beach. It'll crash in, but trust me, it's gonna recede back out again as well. And so it kind of requires some patience.
So you had a maturity that you didn't have 20 years ago now. Did you have people close to you like that were processing that with you, your spouse, like a good friend, mentor, colleague? Like, talk about your inner circle. And I'm not looking for names. I'm just like, you're right. A lot of people go through this alone and then they don't get better, or they stay stuck. So what kinds of people did you process this with, Chris?
Well, this last time I was actually on vacation with my entire family. So I had my wife, I had all 5 of my children, and 4 of them were married. So they're my 4 in-laws. And man, we were sitting around every day processing. It was funny to see how some were actually they would get mad and I'd have to talk them down. And then I would share and they go, hey, we got you. And honestly, because I was so open with it with my family, it created a bonding moment for us, honestly, to walk through that together. And it actually turned out to be a beautiful thing. It was just so painful in the middle of it. And they knew I was struggling and they were very, very supportive. And then I have probably 3 or 4 like on the phone every day type of friends who called 3 or 4 times a day. I'm just checking on you. Hey, I'll fly there right now if you need me. I'll wherever you are, I'm coming. In fact, I had one of my friends just show up unannounced. He didn't even tell me he was coming. He says, man, I just had to see your face. I had to be with you. And I wish that for everybody. In fact, I dedicated Carey the book to my best friend. He's a pastor in the Little Rock area named Rick Bizet. And I end the dedication by saying, my prayer is that everyone could have a friend like him to help them out of the cave. Man. And I think we all need that.
That might be worth the price of admission right there. And because I can't tell you how many guests I've had on who've talked about the epidemic of loneliness and leadership. If we can, because I want to talk more about anxiety, depression, and leaders and everything, but thinking back to 2018, when you read about the suicides of those prominent young pastors and the tragedy that I think gripped all of our hearts, and you said you had like an emotional, like a grief, like you were grieving as though you knew them. Do you know what that was now, looking back on that? Because I think we've had experiences where it just kind of sneaks up on us, right? And it could be innocent. It could be someone we meet that reminds us of something else, some piece in the news. And like, do you know what that was now?
Well, I'm a person of faith, and I really believe God allows me to feel things from time to time for the sake of pastoring people better, honestly. I feel like I need to walk through things and experience them to be sometimes at my best. You know, the Apostle Paul's in his writing to the Corinthian church, he said, my suffering was for your benefit. So I went through this so that I could comfort you with the same comfort that I've received. And so honestly, Carey, I knew that when I was feeling that emotion, and then I was reading those questions from our congregation about their own anxiety, I think the Lord allowed me to feel that so that I could help people through that. And so that's honestly, looking back, I believe it was in some ways, it was sovereign. It was something the Lord allowed for others' benefit. And so that's why I actually embraced the message and even embraced being vulnerable, which was very, very difficult to do. You know, they say confession is good for the soul, but bad for the reputation. I just, you know, it felt good, but I knew this probably wasn't going to make me look good, right? And so, but that's fine if it helps somebody else.
Yeah, you've started to share this message a little bit with leaders. How pervasive, and you coach, I mean, you have some cohorts that go under your leadership. So, I mean, you're connected in a personal way to hundreds of next generation leaders. So, and I so respect that about your work. But based on your observation, how pervasive is anxiety and depression in leaders today?
It's as pervasive as their lifestyles are. So it doesn't matter the size. It's not a size thing. It's not even an amount of responsibility. People don't know how to do soul care. People don't know how to order their lives. And most people are just they're doing everything that psychiatrists and psychologists say will create depression. We're sedentary, we're indoor. I mean, there's a direct correlation on depression and just sunlight. Depression and physical activity but we're behind our computers. There's a long list of things that can create it that are lifestyle related that most leaders do every single one of them. And it would only take one of them to actually get you depressed or have anxiety in your life.
You mentioned something really interesting, even about sunshine, which again, anybody who's done any research on depression and anxiety knows that there's a correlation, but it's spring here as I'm recording this. I just recently moved to my, quote, summer office, which is not here in the basement of my house. And it's a very nice room. It's bright. We have windows. It's well lit. But like I do my meetings outside on the back porch on my MacBook. And, just if it's internal, I feel so much better when I do that. Do you find anything about your personal rhythms about like how much daylight, sunshine, that kind of thing you need to stay optimal?
Yes, same thing. My home office has windows on two sides, and then I don't let an hour pass that I don't get up, walk outside, walk around. I have bird feeders, so I'll go out in the backyard and check, my bird feeders, or I'll walk around just, through the backyard and just get some fresh air, because it really is. There are direct correlations to our lifestyles, and not only sunlight and movement of our bodies, but even our diets. All of that comes into play that, again, busy leaders tend to ignore.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about stigmatism in Out of the Cave. Do you think that mental health is destigmatized yet? I talk about it a lot, or if not, why not? Like, why, in your view, is this still, well, you've already talked about it. It's hard to talk about that as a leader of one of the largest and fastest growing churches in America, to go, yeah, I struggle in this area.
Well, honestly, I think it's getting better. I think that we live in a generation that's willing to be more honest about what they're going through than ever before. But the real stigma has been in the church, because there's been this idea that if you're a Christian, then you can't have problems. Then if you have problems, then you're in sin. And so people actually correlate your spiritual strength to what you're going through. And so we've been afraid to say, you know what, I'm a Christian and I struggle with this. Well, that hasn't been able to marry up very well in the past. And thank God, I think that's beginning to change. And I'd like the church, honestly, to lead the way. We ought to do better at understanding what people go through. I think it begins right there. The way I talk about it is if any other part of my body was sick, if obviously my eyes are, I'm wearing glasses, so I don't have perfect eyes and I need help to see better. No one thinks any differently of me because I'm wearing glasses. But if I told you I'm struggling in my mind, I have some mental health issues, well, my brain is a part of my body just like any other part of my body is, yet we see it a little differently. And I think we have to realize that there are people who struggle there, and I think we need to be more understanding. I have a son, I have 5 children, and my youngest is on the autism spectrum. And I write about this in the book to remove the stigma that, I believe God heals people. That's what, as a person of faith, that's in my theology. But yet my son still needs medical help to, in his words, to put the wires back together, so to treat his mind. And I fully embrace that as well. And I think we just need to talk about that a little bit more. Yeah.
Do you know why the resistance is so deep? Because I might change my mind on this. This might not be the right iteration, but it feels like sometimes in the church, it's like, oh, that isn't really a problem, or just pray your way out of it. But sometimes when it's handled outside of a faith context, it almost feels like it's a problem without a solution. Do you know what I mean? So the Christians jump immediately to the solution, like fix, or it doesn't exist, denial. But the world seems to go, oh no, it's just broken. It's going to be a struggle. And listen, I fully understand, for no fault of anybody, it is. But I do think, any psychologist would say, yeah, there are practices that can make it better. Any reason why the church is so resistant on that?
I don't know. I think the intention is well-meaning. I think they're people of faith. So the whole premise is that we believe for better things, and I think that's true, and I actually do believe that. But I do think there are some things that, if you prayed 6 hours a day and you made some poor lifestyle decisions, you're going to experience anxiety and depression. And so we do need a little bit of an education. And the Bible actually is very vocal on the topic. Ecclesiastes says it's better to have one handful and have peace in your heart than to have 2 handfuls and have toil and a chasing after the wind. Mm-hmm. That was the Bible's way of saying, hey, not everything that is doable is sustainable. Just because you have 2 hands, should you really fill 2 hands? And the Bible comes along and says, no, you probably shouldn't. Better 1 handful and have peace. So that's, there's some practical teachings there that can help us just in everyday life. But when we live in a culture and a generation that's demanding, or at least given the options for so much more, and I think most people are just trapped in that.
Do you think there's anything inherent in leadership itself, in growth? Because often people who lead churches or large organizations like you take criticism because it's like, well, see, I told you that's what mega churches do to people. See, I told you that's what rapid growth does. Do you think there's anything implicit, inherent in high growth, large leadership that leads people to depression and anxiety?
I don't think there's a correlation between the sheer growth or the size. I don't think I have more of a opportunity to be depressed because our church is so large. I think with size comes a better chance for our lives to be mismanaged and for our secrets to be deeper. And because we become such maybe a high up leader that we've isolated ourselves from having relationships with people. And so I see that a lot of times, but I think someone who's leading something very small, who makes poor choices, can still find themselves in that condition. And in fact, everybody's going to have their own taste of it from time to time, no matter what you do.
Oh yeah.
Your soul is emotional. It just is. And so it needs care, and you're going to face these. And that's why, in the book, I try to break it out into two piles, and that's how do we get there? How do we get out? What are some of the things that cause it? Not even intending to be an exhaustive list. It's just, here are the things that for sure happened to this character in the Bible that I chose to study, the prophet Elijah. Here's what he did. Here's how he got there, this great man, and wanting to take his life. And then here's how they get out. And I think knowledge and just having some soul care, but having the knowledge to know what to do when is what.
Yeah. Anything else? Because actually, before we go there, let me ask you this question. Because, when I burned out 15 years ago, our church was 800, not 60,000. And I couldn't keep up. It was a much more complicated problem than that. Obviously, I'm leading an awful lot more today, and I'm keeping up. So I've had to figure out how to crack that code. What have been some things that have kept you from being perpetually overwhelmed or taken you out of the game? Because with 60,000, you probably have, 80,000 who call your church home. You don't know their names. They're in different states. They're on different locations. You're managing hundreds of staff. What, on your good days, keeps you healthy?
Taking a real Sabbath. And even if you're not a person of faith, I think we were designed to work 6 and to completely cease from labor one day. Having a pure, replenish day is something I think people of faith and people who aren't both violate everywhere. People are just constantly filling up every single moment, and I believe we're designed to slow down a bit. So What I try to do, and I would give myself a good solid B+ rating on this, and that is I'm very faithful to this Sabbath. I disconnect from technology for 24 hours. I eat my best meals, spend time with my favorite people, do my favorite activities. In my case, spend time with God. Just, it's a replenishing day that, in the words of Stephen Covey, sharpening the saw. If you keep cutting, but you never stop to sharpen the saw, you're going to have major issues.
How do you respond to the complexity, Chris, of having so many people? Because it's easy to get overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed at times when our church was 50 people, but with that level of complexity, how do you avoid being overwhelmed?
I think there are two things, honestly, that people need to do. One is, I really truly believe people need to slow down. And I keep saying that. I keep talking about lifestyle and pace. But we weren't designed for 7 full days of technology, work, our minds filled. In the Bible, it's the principle of the Sabbath. 6 days work, 1 day cease from labors. And for me, that means disconnecting from. Honestly, if I just don't have anything with technology, it is a pure Sabbath. Spend time with my wife. We take walks. We eat our best meals. But the second thing is I'm convinced what it keeps people healthy are relationships. In fact, I write the very last chapter of the book, which I hope people get to. You never know, right?
Yeah, with the book, yeah.
If they'll make it to the last chapter or not. But I say that what you do is that we all need a sustaining relationship. And I really truly believe that what sustains us, what puts wind in our sails, what helps us is that we were never intended to walk alone. And study after study has shown that we are just the most independent and lonely society in human history. And I truly believe that's what's causing a lot of it.
Yeah. What advice do you give younger leaders about developing friendship? Because I think one of the unique things and I think this is definitely true in ministry. It can be true in leading companies too, where it's like, well, I'm with my employees all the time. Can you have employees as friends? How does that work? I don't have a lot of spare time. My family can't bear the whole burden of my friendship. So what advice, when you counsel young leaders, do you have around relationships?
Yeah, so relationships usually end up in three directions. There are people you would see as kind of over you or people you look up to. Right. There are people that you are over. But then there's these lateral relationships. That's the ones I think need developing. I think if we'll spend time finding I think it could be as few as three people that you're not impressed by them, they're not impressed by you. And here's the key, and that is honesty and transparency. If you can really let them know, the way I say it is you'll always stay as sick as your secrets. And you don't have to share them with everyone, but you have to share them with someone. People need to know what you're going through so that you're not, again, alone in your thoughts. You're not doing that self-talk and that ruminating. If you have someone who knows you and processes with you, and I go so far to say, and then tell them that, hey, if I were to be tempted or if I were to make some bad decisions, this would be the scenario that could create that. And I've gone ahead and kind of done some pre-planning for that. We've already done the fire escape before the fire came, so to speak. We know the route. You see what I'm saying? So we're rehearsing this. Like if I was going to have a bad day, here's probably some of the choices I would make. Would you check on me in this area? And I just think we need to be that kind of honest and transparent.
Yeah, that's pretty vulnerable. And that sounds like a conversation that's harder to have with your spouse. I mean, Tony and I are very transparent in our marriage, but that sounds really good. Without getting too personal, but you dedicated the book to him. Tell me about your friendship with Rick. How did you meet? How do you develop that? How do you get that kind of a best friendship? Because I agree, it is a rarer and rarer commodity. We have 1,000 people we follow online and we're all alone.
We were both on staff at our home church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and golf kind of put us together. He was actually on that mini tour, the one that's just below the PGA Tour, and I was.
Oh, so he's good.
He's very good. And I was learning how to play golf, and we ended up playing golf every Monday for 6 years. Became friends. We started having children at the same time. So almost every one of our children are the same age. He has 4, I have 5. And we just kind of started growing through that. So when we actually started, wanted to go plant a church 20 years ago, he and I were the first 2 ARC church plants. We've now planted 961 churches all across America. But we were kind of the prototype or the guinea pig for it. And so that was kind of fun. But as we started planting churches together, man, that leadership, pressure, stress, pace all came. And that's where our relationship really blossomed. And we were as honest as like, man, I haven't prayed I'm a pastor and I hadn't prayed in 3 weeks. And so, all right, well, I'll call you at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, wake you up. I'll, make sure, and I'll check on you again later just to make, things like that, just real accountability and real vulnerability. And honestly, it's been the cause of a lot of growth. So I just wish that for every person listening. And I think the secret is, Carey, is if you want it, be it first. You're going to reap what you'll sow. So just go ahead and don't wait around for it. Go be that for someone.
I was going to ask you about that because there's a lot of leaders listening who probably have a golf buddy or somebody they play pickleball with or, someone they hang out with or they watch movies with or whatever. But it always stays surface. It's always about the game. It's always about the weather. It's always about what's happening at work, but it never goes deep. What would you say to that leader who says, well, I have friends, but there's a lid to that relationship? Any advice for them on how to break the ice? You kind of hinted at be there, but.
So we just enjoy, honestly, 95% of our relationship is golf, food, vacations. Our families enjoy one another. So we actually schedule a lot of time together. What happens is that's going to build a certain level of trust. You're going to see them at their best, but you're also going to see them at their worst. You're going to know the real them. And what happens really should be close enough confidence that you can share, keep it secrets hate you, right? Even if they're like,
Yeah.
right. And they go like, bro, I'm with you. I'm going to work this through with you. And it takes that level of confidence that I think only really time will give you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've shared this once or twice, but when the pandemic hit and we were in lockdown, one of my best friends is in Atlanta. And I just said, his name's Frank. He's been on the show, Frank Beeler. And we text each other pretty much every single morning now for over a year. And we're into that intimate space and that kind of thing. And I can't wait to jump on a plane and see him again. But and that went with me just going, hey, I'm feeling kind of isolated and lonely. I have a lot of people. Do you mind if we just text and check in with each other every day? And so sometimes you need to take the initiative.
Yeah, it's so good. That's exactly right. And I think all of us need at least, I would say up to 3, but start with 1. Just have one person who says, look, man, could we get to a place where if I share with you what I'm really going through, you could provide a little accountability. And here's what they're going to say. In fact, this is a C.S. Lewis quote, that friendship is born at the moment when someone says, what? You too? But I was the only one. And that's going to be a response. They're going to go, oh my God, Chris. Really? Yeah. Now they're going to go, you're going to find a true friend there.
Well, what are, aside from Sabbath, what does a typical day look like for you in terms of your daily rhythm? Because you've obviously over the decades done a very good job of like not getting completely overwhelmed every day, having a reasonably healthy family life. And at this stage in your leadership, being able to recover and find resilience. So if I drop by on a typical Wednesday or Monday, what would that look like in your life? What would we see?
Well, Monday is my Sabbath because, that's Monday is kind of the weekend for a pastor, right?
so Tuesday or Thursday. And
so, but Tuesday, or Thursday, really the rest of the week, I only go into the office 2 days a week. And I did that since the beginning of the church. I think a lot of people spend too much time in the office. You'll do better with your rhythms and your pace if your meetings were better planned on the front end. They'll be more effective, and they won't have to be so long. So I still only have 2 days of meetings, but for me, I learned years ago that I needed to protect the part of the day where my energy was at its best, and make sure I give my most important activity that time. Which for me, that's my study time, my message prep. So for me, that's the mornings. I'm a morning person. I wake up and my brain is at its best from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and it's kind of downhill after that. So I give my most important activity, which is my study time, prep time, those hours. And so no before 10 o'clock for me with that includes other people. So I guard that time. I don't do breakfast appointments. I don't go out during that time. And I think honestly that one single idea, I don't really have to manage the rest of the day as much. The way I like to say it is, it's not all's well that ends well. It's all's well that begins well. That you can really kind of frame the rest of the day in those first few hours. For me, I call it mastering your mornings. I think that's kind of my personal little secret.
You and I are so similar to that. That's my book coming out this fall, At Your Best, right? Leveraging your energy, not just your time. And it's funny because when I was lead pastor of our church, I only came into the office 2 days a week, which at the time was pretty not controversial, but people are like, really? Aren't you the boss? But I found it was very difficult to get work done. And even now I have a brand new EA. We were just onboarding and I'm like, oh, Fridays is all of a sudden immediately a no-fly zone. I get weekends off now because I'm not in day-to-day church leadership. So that's awesome. But I don't have Sunday responsibilities anymore. But I want to get back to 2 days of 0 meetings because there is something wonderful about that rhythm where you just have some open freedom and you don't have to, you can get your most important stuff done.
Exactly right. I spend an entire day preparing for meetings. That's what my Tuesdays are. So it's an at-home office day just to prepare for the meetings that I'll have the next 2 days. And then I have really good meetings on Wednesday and Thursday. And then I'm back. Friday is more getting my mind around my weekends. And then Saturday I reserve to be around my family, honestly. And so
you have a family day and then a Sabbath day on top of that.
Exactly.
Double weekend.
because you have to work for yourself too. So, I believe in a 6-day work week, 1 day cease from labors. That's 5 for your employer, but you have to have 1 day for yourself.
That is a really interesting thought, Chris, because I've talked to a number of leaders, particularly over the last year. One friend all of a sudden didn't have a job. It was a rather sudden exit. And he found the lack of structure disorienting. And we live in this age of ultimate freedom, right? Where we can do whatever we want, how we want, when we want. And yet people are generally not very happy. What is it about routine that brings meaning?
So in
structure?
From the psychiatrist that I talked to, he said it frames your emotional health. He said the foundation of your emotions are relationships, hands down. You'll only be as healthy as your relationships are. But the framing of your health is what he called routine and schedules. Just having something and having purpose and having clarity about your day. So we all just came out of a 2020 year where there was no place for us to go. We were kind of in lockdown, and now people have even maintained that. More people are working at home, so they don't even have a reason to kind of get up early or to get dressed or to make the bed or and honestly, that if we can get back to those routines, you're going to sense that health again. And I really don't even understand it. I think just personally, I believe God's hardwired us to be that way so that we could live our lives with productivity and purpose.
Well, if you look at it, it's always, the Old Testament's an interesting book, but there were so many festivals and rituals and, you're pausing all the time and you're bringing this and you're bringing that. And if you look at the monastic life, it's very ritual based. And I'm really beginning to think about, a rule of life, as John Mark Comer or Rich Villodas would talk about, or personal rhythms. And I think there is something deeply meaningful about that, as opposed to my life is a blank slate and I can do whatever I want whenever, because that just doesn't seem to lead people to health.
And not only having that purpose, but doing it with a community of friends. So that's an important aspect. Is we were designed to do things. I say this in a Discovery Channel kind of way. We're supposed to do it in a herd or a pack. We're designed to do these projects right together, and that's why the team sports, I think they're another level of fulfillment than these individual sports. Same is true with our lives. And I think one of the healthiest things we can do is pick a tribe and pick something that you're going to do with another group of people, not just taking care of old number one, right?
So you got a number of young leaders listening right now who probably find themselves in that place where there's panic attacks, anxiety, maybe some depression. What advice would you have for them as to practical steps that they could take as soon as they stop listening to this podcast?
Yeah, I think we need to do a health assessment. I've actually written a 20-point health assessment. I mean, simple things from our diet to our sleep, to our pace, to our relationships. And I think we just need to do some type of health assessment and find the areas of our life that we're contributing to our emotions before we pursue avenues of help. And, because again, if you do a lot of this, but you're still not going to go outside, if you do the solutions, but you're still not going to, it's not going to get better. So I think we begin with health. That was the funniest part of the study that I did on the life of Elijah, because an angel visits him, right? So you would think if an angel visits, he's going to do angelic type things like, tell him to pray or to read the Bible more, or to, you just think it was going to be some kind of spiritual something's happening next. And the angel said, hey, go sleep. Hey, wake up and eat. Hey, go sleep again. Hey, go wake up and eat again. So the first prescription the Bible offers was, hey, you know what you need? You need a nap. You know what you need now? You need some food. You know what? I think you ought to go get another nap. All right, you know what? Let's get some food. And the Bible says, strengthened by that food, he journeyed through the rest of the process. And so, and I would say the same is true for leaders. Like, yes, there are some real solutions. Maybe medication is in order, or counseling, or perhaps, you have some identity issues, or you have some relationships that need to be formed. Maybe you've lost your sense of purpose. All those are solutions to depression and anxiety. But you know what? How about we first just kind of sleep, eat. You know what I'm saying? And just get ourselves healthy.
Sounds like my 2006 sleep, eat. It is great advice. Who said 70% of discipleship is a good night's sleep? But there's a lot of truth to that. Chris, people are going to want to connect with you online. The book is called Out of the Cave. It's available anywhere you can get your books. But anything else you want to share about where people can find you before we wrap up today?
Yeah, so beginning up my own podcast, you're inspiring me again, my friend. In the fall, opens in August at growleader.com. That's where we try to serve churches and pastors. And of course, churchofthehighlands.com is where our messages are. And but thank you very, very much.
What's your podcast going to be about, Chris?
We're growing leaders that grow businesses and churches. I mean, that's the whole idea behind Grow was not a growth number, but it was helping people reach what they believe their growth potential is. And so I love systems. So it's going to be very, very practical with just bringing on guests and sharing some of my own things that I've learned in my leadership journey. So,
and what's it called?
Grow Leader.
Grow Leader. All right. Watch for that coming out this fall. Chris, thank you so much for being so honest, so open, so transparent. Really grateful for you.
Thanks, Carey.
Well, I hope today's episode was helpful to you. You can always get more by subscribing to my channel. I also have a lot more content over at CareyNieuwhof.com for leaders in business and leaders in churches. And you can get transcripts of this episode there and so much more, plus some other stuff I do for leaders. So head on over there to discover more at CareyNieuwhof.com. And in the meantime, I really hope our time together today has helped you lead like never before.